Boyd, co-owner Bent Stick Brewing.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Thanks for coming in, man. Yeah, it's always fun. Kind of, you guys are always up to something, so it's kind of fun to chat. You brought in a beer. It's what 1 o'clock in the afternoon right now.
Yeah.
And this is. Let's talk about it. What is it?
Yeah, we got the Ariana Grande Double IPA. We do a beer called Swap the Hops, and a few years ago we did a version of Swap the Hops with a hop called Ariana. We really liked it. It's kind of got some red berry notes to it, and it just came through really well. And we're like, we like this a lot. What if we made it bigger? What if we made it more grande? And so then we made a double IPA with mostly Ariana. There's a little bit of citra hops in there, and a star was born.
And we're talking 8.5% here.
Yeah, I messed up and should have brought something lower ABV.
No,
so
God,
we'll see
no.
how this goes off the rails.
You didn't mess up at all. I messed up, and then I can't get my mic to sit properly. All right, I wanted to kind of go through memory lane a little bit because you guys, your story's been. I think it's a really cool story. When did you guys start?
Our first beer was sold July 1st, 2016.
Okay, and was that that was brewed in your original facility?
Yeah.
So let's talk a little bit about your original facility. What? Because that was it a nano brewery? Would you describe it as?
Yeah, we were Edmonton's first nano brewery, and we probably started with the worst business model in craft beer. We bottle conditioned everything in 650 milliliter bombers. We tried to open without a tap room and distribute bombers across the province through Connect.
Nice.
We made it, but it's a shocker looking back.
So, okay, so what was the original vision? So let's talk about like who are the original founders of Bent Stick?
So there was 4 founders, 2 of which have moved on since then. So there's Patrick and Ben, who are still current partners and brewers and very active in the business. Scott Kendall was involved up until a couple of years ago, and Curtis Jensen was the fourth, who was quite active to start. They've since moved on to other endeavors, and myself and Lisa Davis have moved in as current partners. But the 4 had all worked at Alley Cat together, and then right when all of the minimum production law changes happened, they kind of looked at each other over the bottling line and were like, "Oh, it's probably time to do our own thing." And over time, figured things out. They got a small 3.5 barrel direct fire brew house that went up on the brewery in Fort Road, which is about 1,800 square feet for all of our warehouse and brewing, and eventually a tap room and the whole run of things. To start, we didn't even have kegs. Everything was being brewed into bombers and then bottle conditioned, and then a little bit of direct delivery in and around Edmonton, but a bunch through Connect. And the idea was just to put out new beers all the time. And so small batches really push the edges of what you can do for brewing, and just really beers that we wanted to drink that we hoped other people would want to drink as well.
Right.
Eventually, we had a few restaurants and bars that wanted to carry our beers, but they didn't want to learn a new beer every time. And then our first core beer was the BS Wit. It was the fastest selling beer we made, and then people asked for it again and again, and it became our first sort of core beer.
Yeah, I guess if you want to be in in bars and stuff like that, you need to have some sort of consistency.
Yeah, I mean, there's a handful of spots that are happy to get a new beer all the time, but most of them, a restaurant manager doesn't have time to train staff on a new beer every week.
Yeah, no, totally. So how did you then get involved in the company?
Real roundabout way, but Ben and I went to university together, and then he went and did some environmental studies stuff, and then circled back through brewing, and then got started with Bent Stick. And right as they were starting Bent Stick, in the planning stages, I started actually working with Fallen Timber Meadery.
Okay.
I worked with Nathan and the crew as a Southern Alberta sales rep, and then ended up covering sort of everything but Calgary. And then through that, ended up also working with Ribstone Creek at the same time for a while and doing some split duties.
Nice.
And eventually they got to a point where they needed some help with the sales side of things and the business side of things, and I was looking to get a little more hands-on, and Ben and the group reached out to see if I wanted to be involved, and jumped in head first.
Nice. Okay, so let's talk about the current location. So how long were you guys, first of all, how long were you at the original location? So when would Bent Stick have opened the doors originally?
2016. So that we'd started brewing in June of 2016.
Okay.
And then August of last year, so August of 2021, we had a bit of a snafu on our landlords. Actually, you're out of the building at the end of August, as we were finishing construction on the new location on 99th Street. And we had to do a quick pivot and figure out how that was going to work. And so we actually just brewed our first beers this August. So we spent about a year just being able to contract brew and collab brew with friends and stuff to keep beer on the shelves and stay relevant.
So what was the idea, though? Was it that you were going to stay in the original location until the second location was built out?
Yeah, we had a bit of a handshake deal with the last landlord, and it was, we'll run month to month, and we'll give you, 4 months notice by the time we think it'll be ready to go. And then we'll turn the key and go, and then that didn't happen. So, yeah.
And so then the original location, there's obviously the adventure of not knowing. You're getting into an industry where you don't know what you don't know until it's kind of you're right in the middle of it, right?
Yeah.
So a lot of like a big learning curve there. But then it seems to me like coming into the second location, a big learning curve there too, and like kind of a new adventure of like, holy shit, this is crazy. So you were, from the day you got into the new facility to when you were brewing, how long was that?
It was about 5 months, because we started opening the tap room in March.
Yeah.
And we're able to start pouring beers and getting people into the space. And then while we were doing that, we were still completing some construction on the back, getting it all up and ready to go.
Yeah.
And then our first beers were brewed August 21st, I think.
Yeah.
August 20th.
And so they were, that was when they were first brewed. Like, when were they available?
Would have been the first week of September. So we've just started sort of distributing everything, and
that's cool.
Yeah, we're back in the swing of things.
And sorry, what were you saying about the amount of beer that you produced?
Oh, I mean, it speaks probably more to how little beer we produced the first year. But in our first 3 weeks in the new brewery, we brewed more beer than we did in our entire first year at the old location, our first year of existence. So.
That's really cool. Good for you. And your new location is right across from the Monolith, but is actually in the old Amber's Brewing location.
Yeah, it's a really cool building. It was probably pretty close to teardown status when we got our hands on it, but we walked in and our landlords kind of took us in through the back door, and there's some big glass blocks, and it's probably like 30, 40 feet wide, the building. There's big fir exposed beams, and just the light came in, and it's like, we could drink beers here.
Yeah.
And so then, we got in there. And so before we were in there, it was Amber's Brewing. Before it was Amber's, it was Wings Foods. So all of like every fortune cookie little packet of plum sauce you've had used to be made there.
That's really cool.
We'll often refer to it as the Plum Sauce Palace.
Yeah. Oh, you got to do like a plum beer.
Yeah, I've tossed around doing a plum sauce goza.
Yeah. So were you ever in it when it was Amber's?
Very briefly. I would have been in university at the time, and I think one time we came up to a party in Edmonton, it was like, oh, let's go by Amber's. And one of the doors was unlocked, and you peek your head in, and they only took up like a little corner of the building.
Oh, really?
Yeah, it was a pretty small operation, and so
what was the owner's name?
Jim.
I know it was Jim. I can't remember. I was going to say Jim Button. Obviously,
no,
that's the Village
the wrong guy. Yep.
Yeah, but he was a character, man, and I'm sure he still is a character. But I enjoyed going into there. My wife was pregnant, and maybe I shouldn't share the story, but we went to go see him. We were in Edmonton, and I'm like, oh, we got to stop and say hi. He's awesome. And he somehow convinced, because my wife was like, he's like, oh, have a beer. And she's like, oh, I can't because I'm pregnant. And then he gave this big historical explanation as to like why you can have beer if you're pregnant. And anyway, convinced my wife that it was perfectly okay for her to have a sip of beer. I'm like, wow, that's a superpower, because there's nothing I could have said to convince her to have a sip of beer. But yeah, he was a character.
Yeah, it's shocking he's that convincing, and they didn't make a go of it.
Yeah.
But I think they were a little before their time.
I think so. I think there's a lot of breweries that I've had those conversations with, like, I know Al Ewell that was with Brew Brothers, and he's helped a lot of breweries, and he saw so many kind of blips in the radar with craft beer, where it's just like, and I remember talking to him probably about 7 years ago, and he's like, oh, no, I've seen this trend before, and there'll be 4 or 5 come up, and then, a couple of them will close. He's like, it's not going to sustain itself, and it's continued to sustain itself. So I think we're in something that's a little bit more unique than Alberta's ever seen.
Yeah, kind of got over the hump, and now it's a thing.
I think so. Okay, so you're making beer in your new brewery. What's kind of like, what does Bent Stick look like now? Like, what is the vision for what you guys are and what you guys want to be?
Yeah, so I mean, part of it has actually evolved back into what we had initially planned. We have about a new beer coming out every single week.
Yeah.
But we have our sort of core 4 beers that are around in our WIT, the Electric Boogaloo IPA, the Haymaker Pilsner, and the First Pull Coffee Amber Ale. But other than that, it's like a new beer every single week. The new brewery puts out about finished beer, about 1,500 liters. And so, you kind of get 15 or so kegs. The 1 or 2 go to a few bars or restaurants. The rest kind of go through our tap room. And then a handful of flats go to sort of the top stores around the province. And then the new batch is ready to go.
Yeah.
Which is super cool. So we've built up enough trust with our customers now that we can kind of put out anything, and our customers are like, oh, it's a Bent Stick beer. Like, I feel comfortable grabbing. We made a New England brown ale called Hop Gravy. And, yeah, there's just enough specialty malt to make it look like gravy, but people are like, this will be good, and it is good, but it's nice to be able to have this sort of cachet with our customers.
I was going to say, you have to have a loyal following when you use the word gravy to describe a beer. And it's like, oh, no, I trust these guys. Now, so speaking of customers, though, when you move, because your old location relative to your new location, like, they're not close.
No, we were way up in the north end, just off Fort Road. And we had a really good local customer base. There's nothing in that corner of the city for breweries or things to do.
Right.
It needs some more love, and it was sad to leave that spot. We just couldn't fit it in anymore. Like last year when we were brewing, most beer we'd ever made before, and we were only able to make 10% of our own beer. Everything else had to be contracted.
Right.
And so, yeah, we needed more space. We looked around in the north end, and nothing quite worked as well as the spot that we found. So we still get to see some of those customers semi-regularly, and it's pretty cool when they come in. And
that's what I was wondering is, did some of them make the transition and come visit you?
Yeah, it's not as much. Like, there used to be people you would see every week. You would know that Greg would come in every Friday, and he'd roll up in his car, and he would grab the beers, and he'd make the same jokes, drop off some hot sauce he made. Like, very good customers like that. You don't see them every week anymore, but they still stop by, and it's good to see them.
That's awesome. So why did you, when you were looking at new locations, what was it about the location that you chose? Like, why did you choose it?
A few different reasons. I mean, number one, it's right adjacent to residential. We wanted to build something that was going to be a bit of a community hub. We wanted it to be a place that people would feel comfortable gathering and having a good time in. And so that was important to us. The zoning, we didn't want to have to deal with any hiccups with rezoning the building. And because the last registered use for the space was a brewery, we got to jump over a whole bunch of logistical, bureaucratic BS. Because of that, it had appropriate water and power and all that sort of stuff we needed. It had a proper loading dock and had enough square footage that we don't have to move again. We should be able to be here for the next 20, 30 years without being cramped for space too much.
I would hope so. It's a big space.
Yeah.
But that was what surprised me, though, because you were saying that that it was almost like like a teardown when you walked in. I would have thought it would actually have been really easy for you to move in because it had been an existing brewery. But was it vacant for that whole time?
Yeah, from like about 2008 until 21, it was vacant.
Okay.
And so it was our landlords, our Wings Foods, and so they were using it for extra storage and stuff like that. So all of the old fortune cookie making machines and stuff like that were hanging out in that building.
That's cool. So where does Wings Food? Because I still think of them as your fortune cookies and all that stuff. So where do they make that stuff now?
They've got a facility further south on 99th, plus one in Vancouver and Toronto. So.
Oh, sweet. So it's still Edmonton, though.
Yeah,
That's cool.
Yeah,
That's
and it's
awesome.
cool. Like they're great to us. Like they manufacture things, we manufacture things, and they've been very helpful to us. So it's been pretty cool.
So how would you describe, so if no one's ever been to the brewery, how would you describe it? When I think of the brewery, one thing that sticks out is you have a couch that would have probably belonged in my grandparents' basement. Actually, no, in their front room, because it would have been like the fancy couch. It's like velvety and dark green, and like in today's world, kind of creepy, but kind of fun. That's what I think of when I think of your tasting room. But it's eclectic, right? Like, how would you describe the vibe of your location?
You're drinking in a brewery.
Yeah.
That was sort of the baseline of what we wanted. We wanted when you come into the brewery, you can see, like, if you're in and we're brewing that day, like you can see us brewing and you can smell that we're brewing and see all the stuff going on. That was really important to us because it's part of the experience of visiting a tap room is you get to see, we always say, like, the monkeys in the cage.
Yeah.
But then when we were building it all out and figuring things out, Ziedler Architecture in Calgary helped us out a whole bunch with sort of like the layout and the sight lines and stuff like that for where to put some things.
Yeah.
But then we wanted just to make sure we didn't want it to be over designed. We wanted it to be very comfortable and feel like it was lived in. That the roof has those massive, beautiful fir beams, and so we stuck with a lot of wood furniture, and we just, like, all the furniture in there, we just absolutely hit grand slams on Kijiji and through friends. Like the couch, one of Ben's buddies was like, "I've got this couch," and he sends us a picture, and we're like, "That's a cool couch." He's like, "Yeah, it's in my basement. No one uses it because it's too uncomfortable to be hung over watching Lord of the Rings on."
Yeah.
He's like, "So no one uses my basement. Do you just want it?" And yeah, hell yeah, we want it. And so yeah, we got this unreal couch, which is all, and like it's for something that you would think we built the tap room around. It was just a throw in on the last 2 weeks before we opened.
Like if a couch could be haunted, that couch is
Just haunted by swingers.
Like if a couch could just tell stories,
Yeah.
that couch could tell some stories.
It's great.
So see, people have to come just to see the couch.
Yeah, and the number of times we've had people like, "How much for the couch?" And it's just like, it's $1 million. This couch isn't for sale.
Did you have it like pressure washed before you
No,
put it
it
in
came in immaculate condition. Like, it was amazing. But yeah, and then all of our bench seats and our tables came from a Finn McCool's that shut down, and it turned into like an Indian restaurant.
Yeah.
And the family got all new tables, and they were like, "We want to get rid of these ones." They put a Kijiji or Facebook Marketplace ad out, and they were like, "We just got to get rid of them. We got a fire inspection tomorrow." But we had to take all of their like light fixtures and all the old art from Finn McCool's. Like, we had to take the whole restaurant.
Yeah. They weren't like, come in and pick what you want. It's like, take everything or take nothing.
Yeah, but then we're like, "Well, how much do you want?" They're like, "Make us an offer." We're like, $1,000. They're like, "Sure, done." And so we outfitted the whole tap room for like pennies.
Nice.
And so, and it just works. There's wood and it's comfortable. It's just, yeah, it's a spot you want to come hang out.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So, okay, cool. So speaking of where you want to hang out, I want to talk about kind of just like the beer culture of Edmonton. So I live in Calgary, and sometimes people talk about how, here's where Calgary is, here's where Edmonton is, in terms of like their beer culture. And sometimes they make it sound as if there's like this like logical progression, and you can like, and I don't think there is a logical progression. I don't think that like beer culture follows a path. I think every city creates their own beer culture. And so Edmonton and Calgary are different, and they will always be different. And I think that that's really, really cool. Years ago, I was talking to Bryce, who is
From Last Best?
Yes, he's the distiller now, but he was with Yellowhead. And when he was in Yellowhead, and I said, what is the difference between Edmonton and Calgary in terms of just like pubs and stuff? Because back then there wasn't as much of a beer culture in either city. And he said Edmonton is better with the small rooms, and Calgary's better with the big rooms. And which I thought was a really good, simple description of the two. Like, and then I was talking to Doug yesterday from Monolith, and he said that Edmonton has always been really big into the small pub culture, and the breweries have kind of adapted with that. And so when you go into a brewery in Edmonton, there's this intimate kind of pub vibe.
Yeah, I can totally see that.
Yeah.
I often say that the biggest difference to me is Calgary is always trying to be something, and Edmonton just is.
Yeah.
the people are fine doing things where they are. Like, it's not as much about getting to the destination. It's, oh, there's one over there. Let's go there, do that. Let's have a beer in the park. It's a much more low maintenance culture up here, I find.
Yeah. Yeah. And I'm never trying to say like which is better. I'm saying
no, absolutely.
I think that's awesome that it's different. I don't think that there should be like well, this is what we're trying to get to, or this is the logical place that you want to get to as a culture. And it's like, no, like every city should have a unique culture.
Yeah.
And I think Edmonton does. So, but for you though, how do you describe the Edmonton beer scene?
I mean, it's still developing. I think it's developing across Alberta. There's not as many breweries by any stretch, or even we've got 3 distilleries in town now, and it would be wrong to say like quality over quantity, because Calgary's got some great producers as well. But like, there's not as many. I don't know if it was the lack of like capital to start up small breweries that like slowed Edmonton down versus Calgary, or some law changes, but there's not as much, but they're all pretty well done. Like,
yeah.
I can't think of a Edmonton brewery that's running right now that's, I wouldn't go there.
That's shit. You're going to want to avoid that one.
And it's a pretty close community as far as like the brewery operators go. The number of times we've been able to bum keg washes or supplies or this or that, or help other people out, like it's pretty good that way.
And I love that, because, people always talk about, or I feel like they talk about the beer community being unique and how everybody helps each other. But there's so many really cool specific stories of where you guys actually do. And then with an initiative that you've been, I think, really involved with it, which is Happy Beer Street.
Yep.
Just in your specific area. But just a great example of how breweries, are really collaborating to kind of, put a specific area on the map. So like, maybe just explain what Happy Beer Street is, and why it's something that I feel like you've really been kind of waving the flag on.
Yeah, it's a collective of what'll soon be 8 breweries. It runs along 99th Street, which we're actually working with the city of Edmonton to rename Happy Beer Street from 82nd Avenue, White Ave, down to the White Mud. And so we're the furthest north of the breweries, and then there's Chitty's / Sea Change right beside us, Monolith across the street, Long Roof, Alley Cat, soon to be Ale Architect, Odd Company, Omen is there, and then Sea Change's shop, and then the Monolith and Bira. And it started as just how can we work together and talk with one another and coordinate a little bit to highlight the brewery density for the area. And so it launched last summer. We did a dry hop sour collab, and just sort of, it went from having nothing out there to, hey, Happy Beer Street's a thing. Here's the beer that came out, and we had some merch and stuff, and it was just here's the stuff.
Yeah.
And we let people know about it, and then didn't do a whole lot with Happy Beer Street until May long weekend this year was the first, we called it the Sizzler.
Yeah.
And so we had the first soiree where every brewery on the street did a thing.
Yeah.
And so whether it was a cask or live music or a beer launch or food trucks, and then we just advertised that it was a Happy Beer Street weekend, and it worked really well. Like, when everyone coordinated to a smaller degree and just made it a destination that people could come, and it's not as walkable as it could be, it's not as bikeable as it could be yet, but we're working with the city to improve these things. We want it to be a part of the city to highlight that Edmonton does have a great craft brewing scene. And, when we get talking with Tourism Alberta and people coming around, like, if you have a beer traveler that comes through Edmonton, we want Happy Beer Street to pop up and say, oh, great, this is easy. I can check out some of the best breweries I would say some of them are all of us have won like national brewing awards and stuff like that. Like, there's some of the best beers in the country right here along the stretch of 99th Street.
Totally. Well, and that's a good point, is because I talk to Travel Alberta a lot too. And like, how can we share the stories of, so one of the things that, I never want to say you need to support a brewery because they're local. I think, I believe that the responsibility of breweries is to make really good beer first and foremost, and then then it's easy to support local breweries because you're making world-class beer locally. Well, of course, like support that. And so that is the reality of Alberta is these are world-class beers being produced here. And so we work a lot with Travel Alberta to talk about, how can we showcase these. But I think one of the most important things is what you guys are doing, which is creating these destination areas so that people can see, like you said, when they come into Edmonton, okay, I want to visit a couple breweries, and it's just like, oh shit, I can just like go to that area and I'm good to go.
Yeah, make it easy to drink beer.
Yeah, make it easy. And because we're kind of in that echo chamber of the beer industry where we know how many good breweries there are out there, but the majority of the people are still very new to the game, right? And they're just like, we need to be able to showcase that. So what you guys are doing with Beer Street is so helpful in that, right?
Yeah, and it's been great. I was just thinking as we're talking here, it's interesting how so much of the Edmonton beer scene has been spun off of Alley Cat, like Alley Cat having been an older institution in the city,
Right.
and just the number of brewers that came out of Alley Cat and then went to another spot and then came here. Alley Cat and Yellowhead kind of started the infrastructure for brewing in Edmonton, and just to see how Happy Beer Street, like Alley Cat's the furthest south on Happy Beer Street right now, and it's just all of us have spread out going north from there.
And I think it's cool that Alley Cat is a part of the Happy Beer Street in that it speaks to the history of Edmonton, and I think that's one thing that Edmonton's always done well is be respectful of their history, and the fact that Alley Cat is embraced as part of Happy Beer Street, I think is important.
Yeah. Alley Cat has been a huge supporter of all of our startups. I mean, I'd almost put them. You hear the stories of Village down in Calgary,
Right,
and
totally.
how they've spun off a handful of other breweries, and I would say Alley Cat's been a lot of that for Edmonton.
Yeah, no, I would agree. And it's funny because I had Cameron in from Alley Cat earlier, so the new owner, and I was talking to Jim Button, the founder of Village, earlier, and the amount that they're, I don't know, just having their perspective and their history is important, and from a new brewery to kind of embrace that and take it on as, we're partners, but there's also a mentorship role there too, where like those breweries can teach us so much, right?
Oh yeah, like it's to have a business that's comfortable enough to be an incubator and be okay with the understanding that we will teach people, and at some point in time they might want to leave, and that's okay. Like that, there's a certain amount of confidence, and that's just, it's so cool to see. Like that's a hard thing to do, to train someone and have them be a part of your business and all, like an extension of your family. Understanding that some of them are just going to go and do their own thing
and do exactly what you're doing.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. But what's the quote? What if we train people and they leave? And then the question back would be, what if we don't train people and they stay?
Yeah.
So I feel like these people have trained, the idea that they helped train these people and they built their confidence enough where they felt like they could go and do, because really, like you said, Bent Stick is built on the Alley Cat history, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, it started with 4 guys from Alley Cat. Now Lisa came from Yellowhead. She was the head brewer at Yellowhead
Right.
prior to the pandemic, and then they shut down. And then, I came via Fallen Timber and Ribstone Creek. I'm more on the sales side of stuff. But,
Yeah, I was going to ask you, so what is your role within the company?
I tend to do like admin and sales marketing type stuff. If the other 3 got hit by a bus, I could make beer if we had to. But
God forbid.
No, I don't want that to happen. But I can brew. I think it's an interesting thing about our business is all of the owners can and do make beer, which is I think it's pretty unique within the industry actually.
Yeah.
I tend to do most of the not brewing just because someone has to.
Yeah, someone has to deal with the shit. Okay, so when you guys think about like what types of beers you guys want to brew, and even maybe looking at, like, I don't know, how do you look at trends and say, oh, maybe we should make this beer? How do you balance what you want to brew versus trends and kind of decide where you're going?
A lot of it is just sort of what we want to brew, and it helps that we have pretty diverse tastes. I tend to prefer, out of the four of the owners, more of the hoppier beers and things like that. I enjoy like all beers, but I would say of the four owners, I like a hoppier beer the most. And so I try to stay up to date with what's going on over there. Patrick is a big lager enthusiast, and so he's, been the driving force on beers like Haymaker and our Baltic Porters and stuff like that. And then, Ben and Lisa also like traditional styles, whether it's an alt beer or a brown ale, and so we've got good diversity. And so it's just a matter of, there's some seasonality that goes to it. Sometimes we think of a stupid name like Ariana Grande, and we have to figure out a way to make a beer for it.
You start with a name and you work
That's
backwards.
happened so many times. Lots of times that's happened. Or you get a flavor, you eat something and it tastes like, oh, I could reverse this into a good beer. And you start to build that out and you talk back and forth. And it's fun that all of us can make beer because you can have a pretty high level discussion about how to develop a recipe and go from there.
Yeah.
It tends to go there. And then we've got a pretty good graphic designer that helps with all of our labels and stuff like that. And away we go. But there's no like consistent driving force to what we make when. I wouldn't say we're big on trends. Like we make hazy IPAs because we like them and they sell.
Yeah.
We haven't made a cold IPA. We never did a brute IPA. We didn't do any sour slushy beers. Like some of them we don't jump on right away. But if we like the beers, if we try a beer style in the wild and we like it, we'll try to replicate it.
Yeah. So and how much is it all about what you guys want, or how much do you listen to your customers? Like, because the old cliche of like the customers are always right, I don't think that's correct at all. But I think you still have to make beer that the customers like. So how much is it about you guys sitting around a table going, here's what I want? But how much is it the feedback from people coming in being like, oh, like, are you going to make this, whether it's a sour, whatever the case is?
We get a little bit of that, and we listen to our customers. I don't know if there's a beer that someone's like, you should make this. We're like, sure thing, Bob. But it helps that, like, we kind of designed the brewery on we wanted to brew beers that we wanted to drink and hoped other people would want to drink as well.
Yeah.
And so most of it just happens around that table. And then we've built up, because we have new beers in small batches coming out all the time, and our customers expect that. They've just kind of hopped on the ride, and just the new Bent Stick beer has become exciting for a lot of people, and it's been a driver to liquor stores in the tap room and stuff like that.
Well, and I guess too, you don't have to necessarily walk around the tasting room and be like, what do you like? What do you like? But you can see what they like because you see what's selling, right? So all of a sudden it's like, okay, maybe we should lean into that a little bit more.
Yeah, we've got like a rotating SKU that's like a 6.5% IPA. And so within that, we will play around with, call it 12 different IPAs a year that we'll make within that. And that's our best moving SKU because it's the beer people like.
Yeah. So I'm trying to think if fascinated is the right word, but I'm really interested in the concept of how a brewery. So if you were a brewery right now, just starting out, without any kind of like history, what kind of brewery? I think you have to be more conscious of like what your distribution model is going to be now more than ever. When you guys started though, it was kind of a little bit of kind of like the Wild West where you just started a brewery and then you just kind of figured shit out as you went. And that was more acceptable back then, I think, probably because there was fewer breweries.
Definitely.
So you could kind of be like, okay, we'll do this. When you guys started, like to your point, I was like, holy shit, like we were like, way too small. And like you realize all these errors. I feel like now breweries have to be super dialed in terms of like being able to answer all the questions. The biggest question for me is, what is a brewery's distribution model? So are you going to start as a tasting room, so most of the beer that you produce is going to be sold out your front door, or are you going to can it and then it's going to be go to liquor stores? So for you guys, having started in kind of the Wild West and kind of been able to kind of like evolve, where do you see your distribution model? Like, what's the ideal vision for you guys?
We'd like to be a beer of choice in the Edmonton area, and we would like people in the rest of Alberta that are craft beer enthusiasts that want to get a hold of our beer to be able to get their access to it.
So you have a hybrid of you're going to be canning, putting it out to say like Connect Logistics.
Yeah.
But then also have the tasting room where people can come in.
Yeah, we've got the tasting room, and that's become a huge part of our business from when we first started the brewery to not having a tasting room at all to now we've got the 60-seat place that it's very much a hub for the brewery.
Yeah.
But then we've always been, part of it's probably coming from an Alley Cat background where they were a huge distribution brewery and understanding how the Connect Logistics system works and stuff like that. And then my background from Ribstone and there's just a lot of connections that we had there that we were able to grow and utilize. But yeah, we're not trying to take over the world. I don't think we have ambitions to be selling thousands of hectoliters to BC and Ontario. Like, there's small breweries popping up across the country everywhere. And so how are we going to make our beer? We're proud of our beer. We think it's fantastic. But how are we going to connect with the customer in Vanderhoof, BC, as well as a local brewery there can, right? We're not there in front of them. We're not involved in the community. We're not doing the stuff. And so we're trying as much as we can to focus on Edmonton pretty thoroughly. And then we've got starting to build relationships with a handful of shops throughout the province where, they'll grab a flat of the new beer so that fans of the brewery and craft beer enthusiasts can get a hold of it. But we're trying to be sustainable as a business within the province and the city of Edmonton specifically.
Yeah. Where did the word Vanderhoof, BC come from?
It's one of the most obscure spots I've been. There was a point in time where I was a recruiter for the University of Alberta, and I had to do a circuit through northern BC, and Vanderhoof is the geographic center of British Columbia.
I was like, wow, I've never heard of that place. That was a very specific reference. Yeah. So when you wake up in the morning and you're going to work, what gets you fired up? What's the most exciting thing about what you do?
I love that we're building something that people enjoy consuming and being around, and the fact that we are becoming a community hub. Like, we're starting to get new regulars, and there's people that are building our brewery into part of their weekly life. When we were opening, we were a little bit strapped for cash, and we were like, how do we get things going? And we started a Beer Friends Forever program where there was a 1 liter, 2 liter growler fill for life. And people committed to these beer subscriptions, and we sold way more than we ever thought we would. And it helped us out a ton, but it's interesting seeing just the stop to the brewery to get their weekly growler fill that they committed to support us early and see them come every week, and how some of the people that bought the growlers for life see each other every week, and they look forward to seeing each other, and they'll sit down and have a beer together now. And just having that spot to gather it's super cool. Yeah.
I think that's so important. I think that just the sense of community, and just the sense of there's that, it's a weekly tradition of even just the little things of seeing the same, I get my growler filled, this guy gets his growler filled, and we see each other. I don't know where along the way as towns and cities we kind of lost a little bit of the sense of community, but I feel like the beer community is helping in a small way, but a significant way, to kind of regain that sense of community. Yeah,
I read this book, The Palaces for the People, and it just talks about how we used to have ways we would just casually interact with people throughout your day-to-day, and it's gone away over time as we've built bigger roads, and we've removed, you don't drop your kids off at the classrooms, you don't cross paths with parents there, just all sorts of different things like that.
Yeah.
And it speaks to the lack of the third place where, you go to work, you go home, where else do you go? And just trying to create a spot where people want to gather, and you can build a sense of community and get that back, because everyone gets so insular with inside of phones and things like that. Like, we don't have any TVs in the brewery right now. We had some up for the Oilers playoff run, but we try to be a screenless spot, and people like it.
I think I think being screenless is important, but also what I've learned about, what I've always known about Edmonton, because I grew up in Red Deer, and our household was very much a Oilers fan club. Don't fuck with the Oilers. Yeah. If you want to be TV free throughout the year, great. Maybe during the playoffs, put a TV in, because people like the Oilers.
Oh yeah, as a business choice, it was like, we could be empty for as long as they're in the playoffs, or we could have a spot to gather. And same sort of thing. We had people came, and We'd have beers and gather, and you're this like we were never like rammed to the rafters during the run because so many people go downtown for it. But it had people in there, and you built memories and positive connections. And it's some of the people that came in because we were a local spot with the Oilers game with decent price, good beer. They keep coming in now, and you see them all the time.
Well, even your staff would want to be watching the game.
Yeah.
So it's just like, come on, everybody's saying, and so to the point of don't fuck with the Oilers is I don't know if you know this, but we moved our dates of our festival because we're like, let's face it, the Oilers are going to be awesome for a long time, as far as I'm concerned, and as far as I hope. And I'm like, if we're doing our festivals in June, we'll always be competing against that. And I'm like, I don't want to compete. I actually want to be the guy watching the Oilers in the Stanley Cup, right? So we're actually doing our festivals in March now, our Edmonton festival, for that reason, right?
Just, get out of the way of the playoffs.
Yeah. But having said that, so as a brewery, I think it's cool, let's say 10 of the 12 months not to have TVs in the brewery.
Yeah, and when the playoffs were on, like, it was just Oilers games that would go on, and they were so janky. I bolted a TV to a bunch of pallets, and we just forklifted it over the bar, and it just dangled there.
On a forklift.
Yeah, it was the pallet TV.
I feel like that's the only way I would expect to see a TV set up in your brewery.
Yeah, we might get nicer one day, but for the people appreciated the pallet TV.
Yeah, exactly.
Ingenuity.
So what else do people need to know about you guys? Like, I mean, I feel lucky because I get to kind of like I get to kind of watch breweries like you progress, and I just think it's awesome. But what do people need to know about you guys?
One of our driving goals is we just want to make sure that we make Edmonton and our community cooler. So we do things. We've done like a charity bike ride for Boyle Street that ended up with we ended up at Otto, which is a sausage place after. And so we rode the bikes and raised money and then had just spots to gather and hang out. Probably get into a little more live music over the next year, hopefully. Just same sort of thing. Support that community a bit. We do a fair bit of work with CKUA Radio. We do our hidden track, Citra Lager, which is a fundraiser for the radio station. We've got a collab coming out between us and Blind Man and Establishment. That's a fundraiser for the station.
Nice.
We just want to be involved in people's lives and hang out and get to know people. And we make beer we want to drink. We hope people want to drink it too, and then just have some fun along the way. We find that a lot of people can take beer really serious, and you need to be focused on your craft and make sure you're making good beer, but beer's fun. It's supposed to be a thing you talk over as probably more than you talk about.
I agree. I used to say that a lot, especially that beer for a while got like political and stuff, and I was just like, no, come on. Like we talk about politics while having a beer. We don't talk about the politics of beer.
Yeah.
Like, let's just get back to like just beer is fun. But like and this is what I love sharing stories about. Like yourself and so many, like you guys give a shit. You're making good product, but you can really sense that you're there's an authenticity behind your brand, and I think that's really, really awesome.
Thanks. Yeah, I mean we're probably the most understaffed brewery in the province. For up until July, I think it was, like the staff was the owners. Like we were in the tap room because we weren't brewing at that point in time. And then we saw the brewing on the horizon, and we've scaled up our tap room staff and stuff like that.
Yeah.
But like we have one production staff that's not one of the owners. And so like we're brewing the beer, we're packaging the beer. I hand labeled every one of these cans.
Nice.
We're very involved, and we've grown it from aggressive home brewing tiny brewery to something we have, including like our part-time employees, roughly like 17 different employees now. We try to give back to the community. We try to be a spot where people want to work. We want to be the brewery that people want to come to work at and tell their friends that they work at and have a good time. And
awesome, man. Well, you're killing it as far as I'm concerned. And it's awesome to see the new facility up, and and that you're producing, and it's just kind of like, I feel like there's so much effort that goes into realizing the vision of what you want to be, and you guys are at that point now where like I feel like that vision is being realized, you know?
Yeah, it feels good. Like towards the August of last year when we had to shut down, like we had kind of gotten to like a really good routine of new beer would get canned, it would get delivered, it would be gone, and people were excited about the new beers. And then like I didn't realize how sad I was from like last August until even like when we started like September of not being able to have that portion of our business around. And now that we're back in the swing of things and I'm getting out and able to talk to the shops that I'd been spent years building relationships with again and have those conversations, like it feels good for the thing we tried to build and plan around to be doing what it was supposed to. Yeah, it's amazing.
Well, good for you. And, you know, you're bringing traffic to Monolith, which needs it desperately. So that's important too.
Yeah.
I mean, Doug needs all the help he can get, right?
Yeah, looking forward to seeing what they have coming out in the next couple of years.
Yeah, that guy's a beauty. But you're a beauty too. And no, I do. I really thank you for taking the time to share your story.
No worries.
Thanks, brother.
Get out there, do some more deliveries.
Peace.